Hi everyone, it's Gabrielle here. Today I'm going to show you the technique that I've used to make these bird's nest prints. I was inspired by Alice Art. I'll put the link below. She does some amazing prints, but this is my version of the bird's nest. I use a different technique because I just love the kind of detail that you get in a ghost print with natural materials. So I've just developed a different way of doing things. She does some amazing things with a whole lot of layers. Anyway, so what I'm doing here to start with is cutting out some cardboard eggs. The cardboard is really good when you want just to get the white, of the paper. You don't need, or you just want to use a mask. It doesn't have the same sort of texture as foam. It's very simple. And so I'm laying out a layer here of Prussian blue with a tiny bit of Payne's grey just for a bit of variation in colour and tone. And just laying that out in a kind of reasonably thick but even layer. So it's important to get it even across the plate. And I use these structure paints for this layer just because I found that they hold the detail well. But I've also had good results with like golden fluid paints, fluid acrylics. I think you could do it with a whole range of things. You can see here I've assembled a nest out of some grasses that I collected by the side of the road. I actually found that it works well if you wet the grass. So when you get it home, if you kind of wet all the grasses and assemble it into a circle, tie it together and let it dry, and then you can take away the ties and it kind of forms this circle, which is useful if you want to make a few prints. Otherwise you can just kind of assemble a nest really roughly on your plate. But if you want to keep using it, if you want to make a few Easter cards or something, it can be really helpful to actually assemble a nest so that you don't have to keep doing it every time. And you can see I'm just tucking in the eggs there. I was really just aiming for a composition with a bit of balance here with different elements. So I've got some leaves, I've got some grasses with different shapes. I think the more kind of shapes and texture can really add some interest there. I've got some feathers. I really love feathers, print amazingly well. They're so beautiful. And they're amazing because you can just keep using them over and over again, and they seem to keep printing really well each time. So feathers, leaves, grasses, and then what I'm going to do is just use a scrap piece of paper to take a print, although not much actually will print here, but it's really just to have something to press down all that material into the plate. So what I'm really wanting to do with this print is just to really get everything impressed into the paint and pressed around all those edges. Take off a little bit of paint to give a bit more kind of depth and interest, but I don't want to take off all the paint here. So you can see it's already making some really nice shapes, and now it's just a matter of removing all those things very carefully and gently. It can be a bit the grasses, depending on what sort of grasses you've done. I've experimented with lots of different grass, and some of it with seeds can leave little tiny seeds in your plate, which can be a bit of a pain to pick off one by one. So hopefully you get grasses that don't do that. That feather, the way that came off was really beautiful. And you can see those eggs are still there. I'm actually going to take those off before I do the final print. You could leave them on, really, I suppose would be the alternative. I've always taken them off. And just painting around the edges just to make sure that, so with a dry paintbrush here, where those edges aren't quite clean, I've just gone around to just neaten those edges up. And yeah, it's really important before you put the next layer on that it's all nice and dry. So don't go in with your second layer until this one's really dry. Otherwise things might smudge and you'll wreck all your hard work. Just using a brush there to brush off those last little pesky bits and pieces. And then I'm coming in with that trusty Kmart Anko acrylic, which is just $2 a tube. I just love it. I've found that I like to have a bit of colour as well as the white, just to give a bit more variety and interest in the print. So I'm just putting a tiny bit of, I think it's flow paints. I don't want things that are going to, if possible, I want the same kind of consistency. So if I'm using a light paint, I want to sort of mix light paints for that top layer, so I don't have little bits that get stuck too much and don't move around when I'm trying to spread it around. And I'm also trying to avoid, if I can, big stripes or globs of one colour. I just want a little bit of variety and interest. What I'm aiming for here is just a really, really thin layer. So I want it spread out, covering the whole plate, but I don't want it thick at all. That way I can make sure the whole print will come off. If you make that top layer too thick, you'll find that you don't get all of the bottom layer coming off all in one go. So the best thing is if you can actually keep going, to keep removing paint until you can actually see through. It kind of becomes quite translucent and you can see your design through. So you can see those eggs just starting to appear. That means it's time to put on your printing paper. I'm just using some card here with sort of fairly smooth surface, but you could use any type of paper. Is the beauty of Gelli printing. It all kind of, each paper will come out with a different result, but they're all beautiful, I think. If you find that your paper is sticking and you're not getting the whole print out, it might be the kind of paints that you're using. I found putting some baby oil on my Gelli plate when it was also my printing plate when it was getting a bit sticky has really kind of helped it to not stick again, so would recommend that. Also, if you can leave it on a little bit longer, and also just kind of pressing any little bits that seem to be stuck. So there you go, that one came out well, I thought. You can really see that texture in all the grasses and the leaves and the feathers. What I'm going to do now is actually paint the eggs in the middle. I've decided to paint them a kind of duck egg blue, robin's egg blue colour. So I'm mixing up some yellow and some turquoise blue there with some water. I'm just going for a kind of quite thin wash. What I did was build up the egg shapes in some layers here. I've sort of experimented with trying to put the colour on the printing plate rather than painting it afterwards, but just wasn't able to get the kind of end result that I wanted, and it was just a bit too hit and miss. So I've kind of settled on this as the best way to get the results that I'm after. What I was keen to do here is just to try and actually create a bit of a three-dimensional kind of effect. So by putting the kind of darker colour or darker washes of colour around the outside first and then painting over, building up layers to try and get that kind of sense that the middle is standing out more than the edges, that the edges are sort of recessed with those darker colours. And I did end up, I don't know if I filmed it, but I ended up going back in a little bit with some white acrylic paint mixed in with this blue, just to go over some of those darker spots and to give it a bit more that sort of sense of volume in the centre. So you can work it a bit. You've got to be a bit careful with your paper that you don't get it too wet. But yeah, just building it up to the way that you like it is good. What I found then is sometimes previously I've gone in and done some spattering with a toothbrush on the plate to give the eggs a bit of a sense of, that sort of bird's egg, beautiful speckled look, which I really love in bird's eggs. I didn't do that here on the plate because I thought that the blue, there was already a bit of texture there, but I got to this stage and thought, no, I do really want some of those spattery effects. So what I did was make a little mask just by holding the plate up to the window, to the print up to the window and tracing around the shapes, then cutting out the holes. And then I've just mixed up some brown, bit of brown and black with that toothbrush, a bit of water, and I'm coming back in. I don't know, did you do this in primary school? We did this sort of spattering effect. I don't think I've done it much since then, but it does create lovely bird's egg speckles on your plate, or on your print. So you can see I'm just trying to do it gently, not overdoing it. I don't want it all to be brown, but I just want that little speckly effect here. And that was it, and then I was going to leave it to dry. And that, I think I might have gone in and put a little bit more white just to really make it pop. And you can see they look quite three-dimensional, so I was quite happy with that. And you can also see the detail in those feathers and the leaves. It does take a bit of trial and error, so don't be disappointed if the first ones that you do don't work. It took me quite a few before I was really happy with them. But each one's quite different. I hope you all go well, and yeah, we'd love to see what you make. Okay, thanks so much. Bye.